So last week, oh good, there's my mom too. Last week we started talking about Sarai, who is later renamed Sarah, and I misspoke. I said that Sarah means mother of nations, and it does not. It means noble woman, and it's actually just another kind of twist on the name Sarai. So it's not really a new term there. Just a name change. So we'll go a little bit deeper into that as we cruise through. Also, it's interesting and important to note that Sarai was following her husband, even though he maybe wasn't making the best decisions when he gave her to Pharaoh and said that she was his sister, which we find out she actually is his half sister. So it wasn't a lie. It was just not the whole truth, because yes, she was his half sister and his wife. So then when Pharaoh had her, God sent plagues on the Egyptians. Pharaoh knew, probably through his magicians and soothsayers, that the reason that the plagues happened was because that Sarai was Abram's wife. So he gave her back, let him keep all of the livestock and servant folk that he gave to Abram. And one of the servant women was Hagar, which, as Jeanette said last week, was an Egyptian. So I went a little bit deeper and did some more research, and Jewish tradition actually says that Hagar was Pharaoh's daughter, one of Pharaoh's daughters, and he gave her to Abram because he saw the miracles that Abram and Sarai walked in. So God spoke of two descendants when he spoke with Abram. So God knew, even though it wasn't God's plan, as oftentimes God honors our ability to choose our own paths, even if it is not in accordance with his paths. He just figures out how to work it all together. So he said that your descendants will be like the dust, and then your descendants will be like the stars. So we will get into that a little bit more, but God knew the whole time what was going on there. And the other point is God spoke with the man first, the same as in the garden where God spoke with Adam first. And also the man listened to his wife instead of listening to God. So in the garden, Adam listened to Eve in regards to eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and Abram listened to Sarai with having relations with Hagar to produce an heir, instead of listening to what God said. And Sarai took on the responsibility of producing a timely heir. Oftentimes, God's time is not our time, and I've been guilty of trying to force something to occur in what I think is a timely manner, and it usually ends badly. But again, as God always does, he always turns it around. So we are in Genesis chapter 16, right about where we left off. So we were talking about how Sarai presented her maidservant Hagar to Abram in order to have an heir, so that all of this great wealth that Abram had acquired would not go to a servant in his house, as was the Jewish custom. If there was no heir, then the first male servant born in the house was given all of their goods and things. So, as we said, after they went to Egypt, they lived in Canaan for 10 years. So it's in all likelihood, as we were saying, Sarai and Hagar built up some kind of a relationship, because generally speaking, the Jewish people were kind to their slaves. They weren't cruel. So, and in there are different things in Numbers and Deuteronomy that speaks about how to treat a slave, and then in the New Testament as well, it speaks about how masters are supposed to be kind to their servants. So after Sarai gave Hagar to Abram, when she became pregnant, Hagar started being nasty to Sarai, and Sarai went to Abram and asked, you know, what do we do with this woman now? And Abram said, she's your servant, you deal with her. And Sarai chose to be nasty. So she could have chosen anything, but she chose to be nasty. So Hagar ran into the wilderness, and this is where we left off last time. So it says that the angel of the Lord, which is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, came to Hagar in the wilderness. She was at a spring in the wilderness, so water often represents life and flow and renewal. So Hagar was at this spring, and the angel of the Lord came to her. This is the first time in the scriptures that an angel is mentioned, and oftentimes, as we'll see as we walk our way through the Bible, the first time the angel came and spoke, he spoke with a woman. So which is controversial in the Jewish time, because women were viewed a little bit higher than property, if that. So the fact that the angel of the Lord first came and spoke to a woman is pretty substantial. Some say that when the angel of the Lord is mentioned in the Bible, that it was Jesus, because as we know, Jesus, once he came, lived his life, died, and was resurrected, he was no longer trapped within the confines of time. So he is able to, and also he was the lamb slain before the foundations of the earth, before time was established. So there's nothing scripturally that would prevent him from traveling throughout any time, visiting any people. So that's just something to chew on. And also the angel of the Lord came to Hagar before coming to Sarai. So up to this point, God has spoken with Abram and told Abram that he's going to have a generation of descendants that are as numerous as the dust. And when the angel comes to Hagar, he asks her, where did you come from and where are you going? And she explains that she was in service to Sarai, and Sarai was cruel and she was running away. So the angel of the Lord told her to return and humbly submit to Sarai. Now, as we said, we want to explore the emotions of these ladies as they're going through these challenging circumstances. So she did what her master told her to do, allowed Abram to impregnate her and was carrying the baby, and then Sarai was nasty to her, and then she left. And now the angel of the Lord is saying to go back and to humbly submit yourself to this woman. And I'm sure that was quite challenging, but as with the angels of the Lord, and with when Jesus spoke, they speak with such authority that people are able to overcome natural instincts and to be obedient, recognizing that this person is speaking from a place of truth and of wisdom. So she agreed, and maybe being in his presence, in the presence of the angel of the Lord, changed her heart, changed Hagar's heart, and recognized that she was being cruel to Sarai as well. So she returns, and the next, I believe then we are in chapter 17. Following along here. Yep, so, and then, oh, and she named him, oh, I'm sorry, I was thinking he's still speaking, I'm looking at my notes, he's still speaking with Hagar, And the angel of the Lord says, I will greatly multiply your descendants, which he says to Hagar, which again is not a typical thing that you would expect to hear spoken to a woman. And which is really neat, because as an unmarried woman, she knew that she would be taken care of by her children, which was customary at the time. And again, as we said in Genesis 13:16, like dust that cannot be counted would be the descendants of Hagar. And she was instructed to name her child Ishmael. So she was going to have a son, to name him Ishmael, which means whom God hears, or the one whom God hears, or God hears. And she was an Egyptian, remembering that Hagar came from Egypt, where they were polytheist. They believed in all of the various gods of all of the various things. And God spoke to her. The God of all creation came and spoke to her, and he heard her. He heard the cry of her heart, that, as he often does, he comes to those who are humble, and who are meek, and who are in submission, as Hagar was to Sarai. And he heard her cry and came and answered, because he is the God of the oppressed and the alone and the humble. Then he describes, the angel of the Lord goes on to describe the son that she will have, and he says he will be like a wild donkey in nature, which means he'll be solitary. He'll be, because wild donkeys, they're not pack animals, they're solitary animals, and no one can tame them. People don't tame wild donkeys regularly. And it also says he will fight against his brothers, and they will fight against him. And he will have, so he'll have the beastly nature of the fallen man. Actually, that's exactly what it is. So I didn't write down the word. I think it's Pere, P-E-R-E, and then Adam. So it's like a wild man he will be. So then Hagar calls the angel of the Lord, which another reason why I think that it was Jesus in the flesh speaking to her. She calls him El Roi, which is the God who sees me. And she says, I have seen the God who sees me, and I live, which is interesting, because in Exodus 33:20, God says, no one can see me and live. So just again, something to ponder out about the triune nature of God, and which aspect of God he was saying we're unable to see and live, because many people saw Jesus as God in the flesh and lived very well. So she returns and bears a son, gives birth to a son. And just thinking again, how do we think that, just rhetorically, how do we think that went with Sarai when Hagar came back? And remembering that they had a relationship for 10 years prior to her being impregnated, thinking that when she returned, how would that reunion have felt for them? I would venture to say that everybody had a change of heart, that both Sarai and Hagar had a change of heart. And then she gave birth to the son and named him Ishmael. And now we're on 17. So Genesis 17 begins with the covenant with Abraham, between God and Abraham, and he commands Abraham to walk before me and be blameless. So that's something, when I was looking up the term be blameless, it's be pure, be perfect, and that reminded me that we missed a lady. We jumped right to Abram, and skipped right over Noah and his wife. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. In Genesis 6 speaks about Noah, and Noah was also, he was the only one that was blameless in his generation. So God instructed him to build the ark. We're all familiar with the story of the ark, at least vaguely. So in the book of Jasher, so Noah's wife is not named in the canonical scriptures, but in the book of Jasher, Noah's wife is named, and it's Naamah is her name. And I didn't look up what that means. I'll look it up and let you know next week. So Noah was the only one who was blameless, and Abraham was instructed to be blameless. So just thinking about the difference there, with the inherent blamelessness of Noah, and then the instruction given to Abraham. So Noah's wife, Naamah, she probably had a very interesting time as well, because up to this point in the scriptures it had never rained. The mist came up from the earth and watered all of the things so that they could produce their fruits and trees and things. So Noah got this word from the Lord that there's going to be a flood, and started building this ark. And it took him over 100 years to build it. Jared and I actually visited the ark in Kentucky. I highly recommend it. It's super cool. And they go into just the different ways of life, how it would be on the physical ark. There's another layer to that, but we're not going to get into it today. And so just thinking about Noah's wife, because Noah was ridiculed by everybody. They thought he was a crazy person out there building this enormous structure for a flood, which nobody had any reference to what that could possibly be like. So thinking about Naamah and what she would experience as the wife of Noah while he's doing this thing that was just outrageous at the time. So I just wanted to touch on that quickly. Okay, so throughout the conversation that God has with Abram, this is where God changes his name from Abram to Abraham. And Abram means exalted father. Abraham means father of nations, or father of a multitude. So essentially that's where initially I had got that Sarah is the mother of nations, because they are a married couple. So in the covenant, God describes everything that he will do, and it's just an incredibly exhaustive list of all of these things that God says that he's going to do for Abraham. He says that he'll make him exceedingly fruitful, and he will make nations of him, and kings will come from him, and he will establish his covenant between him and his descendants throughout the generations, an everlasting covenant, and he'll give to Abram and his descendants all of the land of your sojourning. So still recognizing that they're travelers, that they're still going to be nomadic, as we talked about last week. But the land will belong to them. And then there's a scripture that says, anywhere your foot will fall, that land will belong to you. And it's all of these beautiful things. And what God asks in return from Abram is the circumcision of all of his children and the children of his household, his servants' children, on the 8th day after they're born. There's a whole lot with that, but all I'm going to touch on is that on the 8th day after a baby is born, something happens with their blood where it's thicker, and it congeals faster and easier, and there's also a release of endorphins that make things less painful. So it's just interesting how in many ways we're finding science is catching up to the scriptures that has been known for many years. God also changes Sarai's name here. So as we said before, Sarai means princess, and then Sarah means noble woman, and it's a variation of the same name. And it's a cool thing because we spoke about, I believe, all the way at the beginning with Eve, how names are very important in the scriptures, and that the names kind of predict what someone will be like. And in Revelation 2:17, Jesus tells us that he's giving us a new name. So that's the recognition of the new birth that we experience as we become believers and followers of Christ. So Sarah's name was changed, and this is where God tells Abram that she will be the mother of nations. And Abraham's response in Genesis 17, chapter 17, or verse 17, then Abraham fell on his face and laughed. So Abraham laughed at God and says, will a child be born to a man 100 years old? And Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? So it's interesting that his response, when God is distinctly telling him that Sarah is going to be the mother of nations, and his response is to laugh and then to ask that the blessing that he just spoke could be transferred to his son Ishmael, his son with Hagar. And God said no, and that Sarah was going to conceive a child, and that his name shall be Isaac, which translates to he laughs, which I think is really cool, because God wasn't offended when Abraham laughed at his plan. God wasn't like, "Oh, you jerk! What do you don't you know who I am?" That he played into Abraham's doubt, and says his son will be named Isaac, which means he laughs. So I just thought that was really neat. That we just have to remember, even when we question God, or even when we think that the plan that he has for us is silly or stupid, that he doesn't get offended, that God doesn't get offended by our reaction, and he's not surprised by it either. So God does agree to bless Ishmael, and he says that Ishmael will be the start of a great nation. And he also makes sure that Abram knows that his everlasting covenant is with Isaac, and he says he will be born about this time next year. So that's where we're gonna stop for this